got them all for each one of these. It's 50 for the cards, 25 for the library assignment, and 25 for the parasites. So you need to go to the website, go to parasites, and I have answered all 7 questions about each one of them on there, but you cannot cut and paste. You can reword it, but you cannot cut and paste. You haven't processed any of that information. And the purpose of this, handing this in, is not to get 25 bonus points. It is to make sure that you have gone over it before the test. Because the test on that very same day, 1/3 of the questions will be from the parasite bonus. And if you haven't gone over it, you don't know anything about the 5 great neglected classes of parasites, you're going to, the highest you can make on that exam is 60. So the purpose of this is to get you to study for the last biweekly, because remember, it counts twice as 2 biweeklies. It also is 1/2 the final. So you desperately need to make sure that you process and think about that. We will probably have time to go through them, but we will be flying through them. And if you have not prepared in any way, you're going to be in deep, deep poop. The opposite is, if you study the general viruses, the HIV/AIDS, and the 13 parasites, and know it, you will have an extremely good chance for pulling your grade up 1 complete letter grade. Why? Your paper's going to be a guaranteed 90. I assume everybody can follow instructions. 2, your lab record book will be a guaranteed 90 or above, because I assume you can copy this in there. I mean, it's not, my dog can do this. You get a 90 on a lab record book. So that's 2 required grades that you will get an A on. If you get an A on the biweekly, then that means that you will get 3 A's. 2, you'll count twice, and 1/2 the final. So the only thing you really will have to work on is reviewing your missed questions on the midterm, which is the other 1/2 of the final. So final exam is 50% last biweekly, 48% midterm lab practical 2, and 2 questions, actually 4, from lab practical 1, no pictures. So that's what the 200 questions on the final exam will be. And you see that you're going to get that last material that we've been going over since the final exam 3 times. Twice for the biweekly, and once as 1/2 of the final exam. So, for God's sake, study the parasites. And there are hundreds of questions online to practice. If there's 1 practice test for the final exam, and then there is a practice test, 3 or 4 of them on there about HIV/AIDS and viruses and parasites. So on the old website, for God's sake, go practice those. You have 1 week from today. Also, your typed unknown paper. On the day you come to take the biweekly, you will hand me 2 things. You will hand me the parasite bonus. You will hand me the formal unknown typed paper. I will grade it while you're taking your biweekly test. When you're done, you will get the paper with a list of corrections on it. You will take it back home, fix it, put it in the final exam packet. So this is a huge day for your grade. Then the final exams will be on the 28th at 1:30, the 29th at 8 a.m., and the 30th at 5:30. This one is already full if it is not your class. So your choices, if you don't want to, if you want to move your final, your only choice is to come on the 28th or come on the day it's already programmed. Today, before you leave, clean out your locker. If you have an extra lab coat and you want to donate it for people that can't afford one or that sort of thing, you can leave it on my tabletop up here. If you have anything extra, then you can put it, or you can put it in that lost and found over there. If you have anything extra like fingernail polish remover or things that you might have bought and that you didn't use up, gloves, put them up here. If you don't have enough of what you should have in there, just leave it. Nairo will restock it. What should be in there? 4 loops, 2 needles, 4 cups, 2 wooden blocks, 4 slide boxes with your slides in them. Do not put your slides over here. We already have them pouring out over where people are just not cleaning them and just leaving them, which is what usual people do. So even if they're dirty, for God's sake, leave them in the drawer. Because look at that container over there. It is stacked this much higher than the sides, which means they're going to be falling off on the floor and breaking the slides. So leave them in the drawer. Even if they're dirty, leave them in a Ziploc bag or whatever you have them in.
Are we supposed to give you back the time?
No, I mean leave them in the drawer. Oh, that's right. You can bring them next time. Or, I mean, it's not critical. So anyway, and if you have a lock on it, you want to donate it, leave it inside. If it's our lock, leave it unlocked and leave it inside. And then finally, checkers. I have to sign the inside cover of your lab record book. So if this is your lab record book, I have to sign with the Sharpie, and you might be good to bring the Sharpie up with you because mine gets stolen. I think I have one now. I'm going to sign what checker you are, so if you're a room checker or something like that, we need to sign that. So you get, remember, if you're a checker, you get a guarantee. You don't have to do the 10 hours with Micro 40, and you still get the Micro 40 credit, and you get a guaranteed 90 on your lab record book. So, assuming you wrote something, of course. You know, if you left it completely blank, don't think you're going to get 90. All right, so let's go and look at the final exam bonus and the parasite. So if you go to the website, the blog site, and you go down here, remember you can click here to see the videos of class. Yes?
Speaking of Micro 40, are we going to have a take home for that? Or?
It's already on there.
Oh,
yeah, I'll show you. Just remind me in just a second. All right, so if you go down here to the final exam, it says what goes in the final exam packet. Click on that, or click on this. And then if you want to give to the Aegis donation site, if you read online, Aegis is called the AIDS Global Information Site, and it is run by a series of nuns in San Clemente. They live in double wide trailers. They're all in their 70s and 80s. Most of their double wide trailers are computer servers. Most of them are disabled, so they are either in wheelchairs or in beds, and all they do all day long, every day, is they search everywhere in the world on the web for any article published in a scientific journal about HIV/AIDS. And then they index it, and if it's not in English, they either translate it or have it translated. And then they post it, and then this website also is completely personal friendly. And in other words, if you have any question about AIDS, like can you get AIDS from kissing, you can type it in and they will show you the paper and explain the answer. Where can I get tested for free? Type that in, give your zip code, they'll tell you the nearest location. I found out I was positive, what do I do next? Or I got the test results but I don't understand them. All those kinds of things are on there. So it is a wonderful site. It is paid for by big corporations and little people donating, and they have a tax-exempt status from the IRS. And to keep these tax-exempt status and to show to the corporations like Microsoft that they get their huge funding from, they have to prove they have so many thousand individual readers and contributors with small donations. In other words, if you were a millionaire and you gave them $1 million, it would not be as important as 500 people giving $1. Because they have to have a wide swath of the population, of people that go to the website. So, they have asked me if there's any way I can give you bonus or convince people to give $5, $1, whatever. If you do it online, the minimum is $10, but they will immediately send you a receipt. And if you put it on the inside of your lab record book, just attach it to this page or the bottom of this page. If you're a checker, I'll be signing up here. I get 5 more points on the lab record book. So it's not much, but it is important for them to keep their status. So if you want to do it, you can. You don't have to do it. Everybody gets a guaranteed 90 if they complete the requirements, which are pen, blue or black pen, you record the agenda and video front to back. All videos have the title, the date, and an asterisk in the upper right-hand corner. And from back to front, you record your laboratory information. So that's the requirements for the lab record book. No pencil, no eraser, no whiteout, no removed pages. Anytime you make a correction, you slash through, make the correction above it with the date, and initial it. And that's when I went over that in the first day of class, and hopefully everybody still remembers it. So that's the ages bonus. Attach the receipt, and you get an extra 5 points on the lab record book, which would put you at a 95 if you had the, follow the rules so far. Also, I want you to make sure, remind you where the Micro 40, if you're taking Micro 40, the take-home final exam, click on Micro 40 final exam. This explains it. Requirements for the course. Then it gives you the little lecture, and you can look at it as a PowerPoint or look at it as a PDF by clicking here, or you can just read it right here. Once you finish reading the lecture, then right here is the final exam. You fill it out. You can get it in PDF by clicking there. Sign, date, and fill in the multiple choice answers. More than one is correct. And do the list that's required right here. Print it out, include it in your final exam packet, and you will have completed the requirements for Micro 40. So, that's Micro 40. Next, where to get the information about your the parasite bonus and the final exam bonus. Let's talk about final exam bonus. The final exam packet, if you're going to do the final exam bonus, included in the final exam packet, and it talks about it down here at the final exam. There it is. Oh, there it is. Bonus sheet final exam, and the final exam bonus. Oh, where did I have it written here? There it is. No. Final exam bonus. Prepare a 1 to 2 page summary of the motivation and techniques used by AIDS denialists. AIDS denialists are people that either deny the existence of the disease or deny that the disease causes any problem. And we have one that teaches right next door. Sinquista is an AIDS denialist, and they believe that either the virus doesn't exist or it is the HIV virus does not cause a disease, but that they believe there's a conspiracy either against Africa or by the pharmaceutical companies that are killing us, and we're paying them to kill us. And these people believe that there's 2 groups. One that says the virus doesn't even exist and you can't take a picture of it, so I don't know what that is on the back wall, because that's it. And the other one says it exists, but it's not dangerous, and that if you do get the test is no good. And if you do get the test and they do find you're positive, you shouldn't take drugs, because that's what kills you. And if you do have it, then you shouldn't use a condom, because it's a conspiracy to limit the population of minorities. So, it's just all, they're conspiracy theorists about everything. And, right now in Washington they have the conspiracy of let's see, hold it, something went on in Benghazi, people died, and they're trying to, say it's a grand conspiracy, and then there was a conspiracy about the IRS and all this. Well, it's been going on for years. Remember, the IRS used to target churches that spoke out against the war in Afghanistan. Same thing went on during the Bush administration. So, I'm not saying anyone's better than anyone else, but conspiracy theorists are looking for secret agendas behind everything. So where do you want to get this information? First of all, Sequista gives bonus points for watching the most famous video on the topic. It's called House of Numbers. And this is a video produced by the AIDS denialists to convince people that they are correct. Now remember, the difference between a scientist and a pseudoscientist is a scientist looks at the evidence and draws a conclusion. A pseudoscientist makes their decision and looks for evidence to support it and discounts anything that contradicts it. This is pseudoscience. So they made up their mind, it isn't a disease or it is not harmful. And now they're looking for support for theirs, and anything that contradicts it is crap. And so this movie, its announcement, the little preview for it to try to get people to watch it says, the man who discovered the virus, the lab where it was discovered, the man who designed the blood test, and the most famous AIDS researchers in the world admit it's false and it's a conspiracy. And we have the words from their own mouths. And then you look, I encourage people to go and look at the movie. Do a search for it. I think I even may have a link. But yeah, I think I do have a link. But anyway, if you go and look at it, you will see what I see, and that is they will be talking to Luc Montagnier, and they will say, does the blood test have errors and over-report and is unreliable? And he will say, yes, it has. And they will cut it right in the middle of, yes, it. And they'll cut it. And you can see his mouth open to qualify the statement by saying it was designed that way so we can never make a mistake and give positive blood by accident to someone. So it over-reports and says that the top 10% of the negative tests are not used for transfusion because they might be converting to positive. But, so if you look at it, all the interviews are so highly edited, you can make anyone say anything in an interview. And then if you look at the comments by these people after the movie was put out saying, I disavow and deny all the edited statements attributed to me in this movie, you will see that none of the people that they claim said what they said actually agree with what was put together on the movie. So it's interesting, and you can look through it. What?
What's the movie?
So it's on the bottom of the first page of the website. So you just go to the bottom of this first page and it will say final exam bonus. So what do I want you to do? I want you to look through there and know what an AIDS denialist is and list a couple of reasons why people are AIDS denialists, even though they're scientists and they're presented with the facts. What's their motivation? And finally, what information do they use to convince other people that the truth is a lie? And that's called the 7 deadly deceptions. And if you go down here, you will see. Going down, how to answer questions when people, and this is the 7 deadly deceptions that they use to warp information. So put together something, page and a half, type, and then you will get 5 bonus points on the final, which is 3%. So 5 bonus points out of 200 on the final is 3%, and that's what I will add to your final exam. So in other words, this is a 5-point curve. And if you don't have it, you still get the points you make on the final. So that takes care of that. The only other thing that I want to show you on the website is where to find the parasite bonus information again, in case you didn't, and where to get the lectures. So if you go to final exam material, this is where the lectures come from. These are the PowerPoints. on the lectures. And then where do you get the information about how to, the 7 questions about the 13 parasites? And that is, go to Eukaryotic Parasites, Chapter 11 Notes. Click on that. That's an introduction and viroids and everything that we just talked about. And then down at the very bottom, after prions and hepatitis C, is the Eukaryotic Parasite Chapter 11 Notes. And these are the 7 questions that I will ask you about the 13 parasites. And then if you go and click on this button, that's the lecture where I answer all 7 questions about every one of the parasites. And here's where it starts.
I missed how you got there.
Just click.
It says chapter 11.
Yeah, it says Chapter 11. Go to the Comprehensive Final Exam. Go to the bottom. Click on Eukaryotic Parasite Notes. And then you put, there's the discussion. And all 13 parasites are listed. And all 7 questions are answered in order on the discussion. All you have to do is convert it to your words and, you know, make it something you might understand. And that's that. Now, where to get questions? Practice questions for this test. Go back. Practice final exam. You can look through it and find the questions about, skip the ones on immune system. And there it is. There's the parasite old exam questions. The definitive host of Bilharzia, the guinea worm. These are all the 13 parasite questions. And then after them comes the AIDS and general general virus questions. Immunity to chickenpox is not going to be on there. The class of antibodies, we didn't get to that chapter. But you can look through there, and then the best place to get it is go to the website, the old website, click on micro website log on, do your log on. Go to the navigation page and click on old exams.
Is there any way that we can put that in the Dropbox? When I go to the old website, it freezes my computer.
If you send me a, actually, it is already on Dropbox.
Oh.
I think it's on old exams in Dropbox. Let me just check in just a second. Let's see, where's this? Is old test right there. And if you go to bi-weekly test 5-6, I think it is. Yes, there's the parasite and virus. 200 of them. So you can practice easily. They're all there's hardly any other way I can twist them from what they are, so they're very good for you there. Let me just see on Dropbox if it's already listed.
Very easy site.
I forgot my stupid password. But anyway, I'm 90% sure it's in there.
Would it be called bi-weekly 5-6, or is it going to be?
I don't know. But it's definitely there because everything from last term is there.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
just can't get into my box. I forgot. I haven't saved my password for that. All right, so anyway, we need to get busy with the lecture for today. Anyone have any questions?
Can we turn the air off, please?
Why?
It's so cold.
Good, you'll fall asleep. Yeah. Well, actually, we can't turn it off. We can turn it so it's not quite so gone, Bunsen burner now. We'll see.
Everybody just put your Bunsen burners on.
Yeah, you may have to get in your lab coat and turn on your Bunsen burner. All right, so anyway, we're starting with Human Papilloma Virus today. And let me just cut down a little bit of the glare here. All right, so Human Papilloma Virus is a virus. Oh gosh.
Bless you.
Sorry.
That's it, coldness.
Yeah. It's a virus. It has like 50 to 100 different subspecies of it, and it is. Oh gosh, I'm going to do it again.
Bless you.
Sorry. Happens to me when I get too close. Anyway, it's many subspecies, but the two major diseases it causes is several different kinds of cancer. It's the leading cause of cervical cancer, and there are two major strains, HPV 16 and 18 are the overwhelming, like 85% of all cervical cancers are caused by those strains of human papillomavirus. And genital warts, which are highly contagious warts that are on your genital regions, that is caused by HPV 11. However, 31 and 35 are also involved, and I believe also 33, and that is involved in penis, anal, and head, neck, and throat cancer. So it is not a fun little virus, quite a problem virus, and it is transmitted by contact. And people put their faces in many different places, and so you can actually get it by contact orally, and it can move to one of these other places. A lot of people think you have to have sex with one of these places to get the virus there. No, you can get the virus and it can locate at one of these places. So the virus is a rather serious virus. It is the leading cause of cervical cancer. It is the only cause of genital warts. It is the leading cause of penis, anal, head, neck, and throat cancer. So anyway, the key point that many people get confused on, that you should not get confused on, is the warts do not lead to cancer. In other words, the warts are just warts, but they're bad enough. Now these warts caused by HPV strain 11 they look like the plantar's warts that people get on their hands, which is also caused by a virus, but is a different one and is not horribly contagious. This virus, HPV 11, is horribly contagious, and there will be warts the size of your little finger on people's hoo-hoo and hee-hee. And if you see one visible wart, there are several hundred microscopic ones around it. And how do you get infected with it? That. Just brushing the top of it will release hundreds of thousands of viral particles. So your underwear rubbing against it will actually be constantly releasing viral particles. All it takes is contact with a mucous membrane or a break in the skin or an ingrown hair or anything like that, and the virus will spread the warts. And people that ignore it do so at their peril because they will spread. So it can actually fill the entire vagina, It can fill the entire anus so that you can't even have an elimination. It can fill the entire throat and back of the mouth. So the warts spread, and they're serious, and this is what your mama told you about when she said don't have sex with people you don't know. And if you are going to be convinced to do that, strip them down, grab a flashlight, and look deep in every hole before you do it, because if you see one, there are hundreds. And please do not do what one of my students did a couple of terms ago, and that is, he had one, so he decided, I don't want to tell anybody, I don't want to go to this nurse and get a referral or anything like that. I'm just going to take a pair of scissors and a razor blade and cut it off. You're cutting your hee-hee. And that is not good. You can get horrible infections, and it can be horribly painful to do, and it can get incredibly sore, and it doesn't work. They come back because all you're doing is getting rid of the ones you can see. So, what he did was this. First, he tried chopping it off with a razor blade, and it came back. So, his next was he went to Rite Aid and bought the hand wart removal cream and the little spray can to freeze it off. You're doing this to your hee-hee. That is a very sensitive area. And you do not want to put the drops, which are an acid, on your hee-hee. Nor do you want to use the little can that freezes it off on your hee-hee, because again, you're only getting rid of the visible ones. And they come back. So the only real way of getting rid of these is to go to a decent dermatologist and have them frozen or burned off, and they give you a little anesthetic there, and they get completely rid of them. And someone asked me in the other class, is that a cure? Legally, it is not a cure, but effectively, it is. Why? If you remove the top of the wart, it can't exit and spread to other people and to more cells of you. If you burn it off, the top, you remove the exit strategy, and epithelial cells die on a regular basis every 2 or 3 weeks. So once they die, the virus inside them dies. So effectively it is a cure, but it's not actually a cure on the moment. It takes a little while. But if you go to a good dermatologist and get them off, them removed, then you have trapped the virus in cells that will eventually die. So that's good. All right, what about the other types that cause cervical cancer? Number one thing to remember is, for God's sake, get a pap smear. Get a pap smear every year. Do not listen to what they say about the recommendation of if you've had 5 good years of pap smear, you can get one every 3 or one every 5 years to save money on the healthcare system. It is not a good place to save money. Save money somewhere else. But why? Again, it's about statistics versus reality. If you look at a person who gets a good pap smear from a good laboratory, is sent to a good laboratory, and is read by an experienced person, and that is recorded properly, then yes, 5 good years, you can start skipping and doing it once every 3 years until you get a bad one. But that's not what happens in real life. Remember, your doctor contracts to a medical laboratory. These medical laboratories are regulated, but not well. I used to work for one, so I know what goes on inside the medical laboratories. And what happened to the one I worked for, which by the way is no longer there, but was owned by the mob. It was owned by gangsters from Delaware. And they owned a whole bunch of labs, and they owned part of Enterprise Rent-A-Car at the time. So they were a very effective group because they were only interested in profits, huge profits. And so what they would do is they underbid all the labs in LA County by 25%. They underbid the cost they were going to charge these doctors. And so the doctors sent over 600 pap smears a day to our labs. But we only had 25 technicians. And if they didn't get finished with them, they reported the ones they didn't get finished with as indeterminate. In other words, they said they read them and they were confused about the results and get retested. Most people take a very tricky test that they're worried about, indeterminate as no big deal. And they don't go back and get a repeat. There's indeterminate, you're supposed to be retested. So the lab got to charge for the pap smear, even though no one read them, and they only last a few days. Remember, it's just a gentle scraping of the cells on the cervix put on a slide and sent in an overnight pack to a lab, and they look for the CPE. So if the lab lies or doesn't get to it and reports it as indeterminate, and your doctor uses that lab for 5 years, what if each time they report it back indeterminate? Then you could not have a good reading. So there are too many inconsistencies in a pap smear reading for you to trust that you can skip 3 years. It's very much like mammograms. My sister and my mother got breast cancer 5 years apart. My sister noticed a lump, immediately went, had it biopsied, and it was stage 2 breast cancer. It had not spread to her lymph nodes, thank God, but because it was hormone-based and she had been taking a birth control patch for years, she decided to have a double mastectomy and a reconstruction. All went well, fine. 3 years later, she's in there getting ready to go out to the beach with my mom. My mom's changing into her swimming suit, and my sister says, "What's a little protrusion on your breast?" And my mom says, "I don't know." My sister said, "Oh my God, it feels exactly like the lump I had, and it's exactly in the same place. You've got to go see that, have that seen about it." So she did, and hers was 3rd stage. It already went to her lymph nodes. And again, hormone-based, based on the fact that she had hormone replacement therapy during menopause. So after all this was done, and both of them are doing fine, but here's the point. They had had a mammogram every year. How do you miss a lump that big? You don't. So we went back and said we would like, they both went to the same hospital in a little town in Alabama to have their mammograms. So we went back to the hospital and said we'd like the last 3 years of their mammogram. They couldn't find them. Why? Because they knew they'd get sued. And they didn't either have good technicians reading them, or maybe they weren't read at all because so many were done. They were just put in a pile and put in the records section. So that's why I think every year is very important, because hopefully you'll get different people reading them, different labs reading them and so forth, and you can be fairly confident of your results if you do it every year. If you skip for 3 years, God only knows. So remember, as we talked about with herpes, the pap smear is very good for detecting the existence of both herpes and human papilloma virus by CPE. But what's better? Anybody remember from herpes, what's the better way to diagnose?
The culture.
That's right, cell culture. And it's the same thing for human papilloma virus. The best is cell culture, but it's much more expensive and takes more time. So most every time they use pap smear. And pap smear is quite good if you're educated and have a good lab. So what if you do get a bad pap smear? And what are bad pap smears? And that is, pap smears are rated. They give you back pap smear 0, no problem, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. When do you want to panic or get worried? With 4 and 5. But remember, if you get a bad pap smear, this is a 99.9% curable cancer. This is, if you're asked, and there will be a question, what is the most curable cancer of all? Human cancer, cervical cancer. If you catch it in stage 1, 2, or 3, if you catch it in stage 1, 2, or 3, all they're going to do is a gentle scraping of the abnormal cells off and allow the normal cells to fill in. And so you'll get your pap smear and they'll give you a 1 or a 2. And then they will say, come back in 90 days to 100 days, and they'll give another one. And if it's bad again, they'll do another scraping. So what you do is you basically come back in 3 to 6 months every time until you get a good pap smear, and then you go back to once a year. What if you get a 4 or a 5? Then they're going to send you for laser, and that's where a laser is used to remove all the abnormal cells. Now, what if you get a 3 this year, come back in 6 months, and it goes to a 2, and you come back in 6 more months, it's a 0, and you go back to once a year, and the next year you come in, it's a 3 again. The reason most commonly is you're constantly being reinfected by your sexual partner. Remember, men carry it. Doesn't really cause much problem with them except in rare anal and penile cancers. So men can constantly reinfect their sexual partner. So this is why you've got to have it every year. What if you get a positive reading? Can you get rid of it? And this is one of the funny things, that over a 5-year period, people can get human papilloma virus and it can disappear. Your body will eventually get rid of it in most cases. So that's the good news. Bad news is if it does go into these, what we call dysplasia, about 10% of these people that have a bad pap smear do go into the dysplasia and get abnormal cells that will lead to a cervical tumor if they are not removed. Now, what happens if you're not removed? And this is serious because lots of people are annoyed or embarrassed by the actual event of getting a pap smear. Listen, ladies, it's not any worse than when they stick their finger up their butt, our butts, and pull on our testicles and say cough. So, you know, go and get it. I have a 27-year-old niece that for years would not go get a pap smear because she was humiliated. Which is worse, being humiliated for 30 minutes or dying? Go get humiliated. Everybody needs to come down a couple of notches anyway. So, go get it. And just an example of what can happen. I had a wonderful, my very favorite, most favorite aunt of all, the one that worked in a shirt factory all her life and took a bus to come and sit with me when I had my operations in Atlanta. She was a wonderful, wonderful person, but she had terrible taste in men. And when she was growing up, she dated, in her teenage years, Paul Blackwell, who lived down the dirt road from her. They fell in love. They had hot, torrid sex. He went to my grandfather and said, I want to marry her. My grandfather said, hell no. Your older brother married her older sister, and he's a wife beater and a drunk. It runs in families, and no thank you. You may not see her again. And he and she were very angry, and she said, I'll never date again. Screw you all. And so she stayed and took care of my grandmother and grandfather until they both died. And the moment after my grandmother died, she walked down the road to find Paul Blackwell. And they were both in their 50s then, and he was on his 3rd wife. Already been divorced 3 times. And they got engaged, and she went for her checkup. You know how you get that little blood test and checkup before you get married? And they found advanced cervical cancer. Why? Because she was embarrassed, and because she read the literature that said the only time you need a regular pap smear is when you're sexually active. And since she was only sexually active 1 or 2 times when she was 18, she didn't believe she needed a pap smear all the years in between. So, she got married when she had advanced cervical cancer. They had to implant a radioactive bullet in the tumor. It didn't work. It melted her intestines as well as the tumor. She basically vomited up poo and all. Oh, it was horrible. The death was miserable. all because she misinterpreted the recommendation. If you have ever had sex, then you're going to need a pap smear for the rest of your life every year. It doesn't mean if you're having sex now. By the way, they have both male and female pap smears. The male pap smear is basically the same thing. You take a little Q-tip and you go in the urethra, you smear that on a slide, and then you take a Q-tip and you go around the anal cells. Remember, you don't have to have sex there to get the virus there. And they send it in and they check it, and that's for penile cancer and anal cancer. And so they do have it, and it's important to get, particularly for women, not so much for men, but you know, I'm one of those people that really believes in all the tests and all the vaccines. So anyway, what about condoms? Well, condoms are great for preventing pregnancy, and they're great for preventing STDs like gonorrhea and syphilis and HIV/AIDS. They are okay for trying to prevent herpes and human papillomavirus. These are much more contagious than the others. So handling the condom itself can actually get you the viruses. So they are not as effective. They are better than nothing, but they're not as effective in preventing HPV infection or herpes. All right.
Your thoughts on
what?
Your thoughts on Gardasil?
Going to get there.
Okay, great.
Okay, so let's see, anything else? What is it? 85% of all men are carrying at least one HPV strain. 75% of all women that have had sex are infected with at least one strain. If you have an active infection and you have natural childbirth, then the baby can get laryngeal cancer. So it's definitely smart. Go get the pap smear on a regular basis. If there's a problem, get the scraping, everything will be fine. Let's talk about the actual strains. There are 70 different viruses that are human papillomaviruses. The only ones that are sexually transmitted are strains 6, 11, 16, 18, 31, and 35. Those are sexually transmitted. The others are orally or contact transmitted. The ones that cause cervical cancer and rectal cancer are 16, 18, 31, 33, and 35. But these cause over 85% of all cervical cancers, so these two, plus this one, that causes warts, are in the vaccine called Gardasil. And so it's very important that you know this, because if a person, when the Gardasil vaccine first came out, there wasn't much of it, and it was very expensive. And so the recommendation was non-sexually active young girls should be vaccinated as a childhood vaccine. And the reason for that was that if they've never had sexual contact, they haven't gotten it yet, and this prevents them from getting the one that causes 85% of the cervical cancer, and it prevents the ugly, nasty, contagious warts. And then when the vaccine became more available and cheaper, they said, give it to young boys. Now, why would they give it to young boys? How many boys have cervix? None. So why would they give it to boys?
They're curious.
Because where do girls get it from? Boys. And it also gets rid of the, prevents the warts. So they gave it to boys. And then, once that market was saturated, all the people that wanted to give it to their young girls and young boys, then they said, okay, it's available now for anyone if you pap smear and find that you don't have the strains in the vaccine. Now, if you do a pap smear and you already have 16 and 11, the vaccine's not going to do you any good. But once they said that, I went and got a genotype, which is they do the pap smear and then they type the human papillomavirus that you have. And I had, what was it? I think it was 8 31 and 33. Yes? Okay, you got the email, right? It's all dismissed.
Oh, yeah, that I got, but.
Oh, okay. Probably about 11:15, come up there? Okay. It's nothing serious, is it? Anything that's more panic this week?
No, I'm sure. Nobody was.
Okay. All right, so, anyway, came back that I didn't have 16, 18, or 11. But I did have 2 to worry about, 31 and 33. And those called rectal, anal, penile cancer, and since I don't have a cervix, I don't have to worry about cervical. So, I went and got the vaccine, and I went to Accessa because at my doctor's office they wanted something like $900. $300 for each of the 3 boosters that you need. And I went to Accessa, and it was $70 each. So big difference in price. So, you know, Accessa is a place where you can go get the vaccines you need for your passport to travel in areas where they have certain diseases like yellow fever that you need. And you can get all kinds of vaccines so much cheaper than in a doctor's office if you have insurance. They don't take insurance, but you have a medical, flexible medical spending account, they will take that. So anyway, I went there and I got it, and I went back, you know, you get one, you go back a little over a month later for the second one, you go back a little over a month after that for the third one, and that's fine. And then I waited 3 years and I had the pap smear done again, and guess what? No 31 or 35, they disappeared. So if you do, remember, one of the interesting things about this is very few people go on to develop cancer, but you still want to prevent it. And 2, even if you have one of the strains that are not in the vaccine, if you're in good health, eventually your body, most of the time, will get rid of it. So I'm protected against 16, 18, and 11, and I no longer have 31 or 35, so that's great. All right, so there are 2 vaccines. There's Cervarix, you don't want to get that, and Gardasil. And why don't you want to get Cervarix? It only has 16 and 18 in it. You don't want the warts either, so why not? You're going to pay that much for a vaccine. Why not get the ones that prevents the warts as well? So anyway, now, what about the controversy? There's a big controversy about Gardasil. You know, conspiracy theorists are running amok on everything. And so, oh God, what was that whack job, excuse my opinion, woman that ran for president from Minnesota? I don't remember. What's her name?
Oh, from Minnesota.
Wasn't it Minnesota?
Alaska.
No.
Alaska.
No, Palin agreed, but this was the one that ran the last time, the Republican, what?
Buckman?
Yes. All right, so she's out on the campaign trail as a Tea Party candidate and all that. And she says, I want to talk about women's health. And the thing I want to do is to tell you that I am against giving children the Gardasil, giving young girls the Gardasil vaccine as the state of Texas has recommended as a childhood vaccine. And the reason I'm against it is one of my constituents came up and told me that they gave their daughter this and she got a reaction to the vaccine, and now she is permanently mentally disabled. And it encourages young girls to be ho-hos. And that by knowing that they're prevented from getting cervical cancer, they will go out and have much more promiscuous behavior. If you read and go for the vaccine, they will give you the little lecture. It only prevents 85% of the strains that cause cervical cancer. There are still strains that are not in the vaccine, and you have to use good sense and protection, because while you're prevented from getting these, there are still strains that you can get that are not in the vaccine. And yet, these people are completely insane, because their idea is, I don't want to prevent my girl from getting cervical cancer by giving her this vaccine because I want to use fear to keep her in line. I mean, my God, the insanity of it all. So, the science community went crazy, whether they were Republican or Democrat, with her Bachman's statement, which was echoed by Palin and all the rest of them. And so, at her next news conference, a reporter from the National Observer said, exactly what constituent are you speaking of? I want to know the name of the person that you say was mentally incapacitated by the vaccine. And come to find out, it was just hearsay. You know, one of those little stories that is passed on in urban legend. Yes, every vaccine has an incredibly small risk. Look at the risk of disease versus the risk of a vaccine reaction, and you'll see it's 1 in 5 million for a vaccine reaction, and it's much more dangerous for the disease. So people that are hysterical about getting vaccines, if you want, and they don't want to give their kids vaccines, have them come to me and I'll show them my leg. That's what polio will do to their kids if they avoid the polio vaccine, and that getting the disease is so much worse than your chances of getting a vaccine reaction. So, do you have any questions about it? So, anyway, my idea is everybody should go get tested and find out if they're infected and with what strains, and if they are not infected with one of these 3 strains that are in here, get the vaccine. And if you are infected with them, don't panic, just get your regular pap smear. It's incredibly treatable. So that's everything about HPV. You can read through, there's much more notes here, but everything that I'm going to ask you about it is already on there. And it talks about the other cancers of the vulva, vagina, penis, anus, head, neck, tongue, tonsils, and throat, all caused by HPV. And Harold Zerhansen is the guy who got the Nobel Prize in 2008 for doing, I think it was over 60,000 DNA probes of cervical cancer tumors removed from women, and was able to conclusively prove that HPV is the cause, 16 and 18 most predominantly of it. These are the 2 people that got the Nobel Prize at the same time for discovering the virus that causes AIDS that the Americans stole and then claimed for themselves. And so to give them credit for something that they were prevented from getting credit for, that's why the Nobel Prize was given to Luc Montagnier and Barry Simset. All right, so moving onward past HPV, hantavirus pulmonary syndrome is the next one we want to talk about. This is an RNA single-strand bunny virus. Don't you love that? Bunny virus? It's cute. Okay, it's a hemorrhagic virus. It's a virus that is common in the southwestern United States, southern Canada, northern Mexico, all the way down to Central America. Its host is the deer mouse, which any little mouse that you see running around in the grass around here, and has those little ears that are shaped like a deer, that's the brown deer mouse. And it lives in a symbiotic relationship with the deer mouse, which means it doesn't hurt the deer mouse. And the virus itself lives there, it has a host, it doesn't hurt the host, it doesn't kill its host, and there's no problem. It's only a problem when this virus gets into people, which is a new host. And remember, whenever a microbe moves from its original to a new host, it's called a zoonosis. And it is almost always more deadly in a new host than an old one. So the mouse and the hantavirus pulmonary virus have reached an accommodation where they both are just fine. It's only when that virus gets into humans that it's deadly. So it used to be called Four Corners disease, and before that it was called the Navajo disease, which the Navajo didn't appreciate. And so anyway,